Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie and in this video we are building a habitat for the adorable Binturong. So in the last episode of Little Asia, I built an enclosure for the Indian rhinoceros and the wild water buffalo. And right here you can see a large open space that I hadn't really thought about what I wanted to do with it. I didn't actually intend for this space to ever exist, really. I had planned out this zoo and I had kind of ignored this area. It's kind of an accident. So in today's episode, I'm going to fill it by introducing a personal favourite animal of mine, the Binturong. One of the reasons it is a personal favourite of mine is me and my wife have a joke. If you've ever seen these guys in a zoo, if you've seen them in person, you'll know that they have hair on the side of their head that come to a nice little spike or point. They've got like really cute tufts on the side of their head. And each morning I wake up with hair that looks just like that, and we refer to those as my binty bits. So these animals are personal favourites of mine. Something that I wanted to do straight away with this habitat was to have a partially raised viewing gallery at the front. I like the idea of having a lower fence at the front that kind of rises up around the edge, but you have a raised path to meet the lowered fence, so it's not ridiculously low, which allows your guests to look in nice and easily. I tried to just do it with a bit of raised ground and I didn't quite like how it turned out. So he could see me playing about with that, but in the end I just used a raised path instead and it all goes pretty well. And with the path in place and the surrounding area already giving us some limitations, I use this shape that's already here to influence how our enclosure is going to look. Normally I'm building a shape and then kind of going round it with the paths and stuff, but here I'm letting the pathing really influence the enclosure. So I'm just using the wooden barriers to appropriate lengths and going round, filling this area as nicely as I can, making sure that it's not too rigid, it's still got a bit of fluidity to it, and then I will come back and I will adjust the heights to make it shorter at the front whilst keeping the back nice and high. Also, as I know the Binturong love a good climb, I make sure to add the anti-climb barrier to the top of this fencing by going down to the climb-proof section on the barrier settings, switching it to either left or right, but I choose both just because I can never really figure out which side is left or right. What side are we meant to be looking at it from? Are we looking from the inside of the enclosure or the outside? It kind of changes on your perspective, so I don't really bother. I always just go with both. Whilst our animals are in quarantine, making sure they're not sick or injured, I'm going to start working on the terrain for this habitat. I don't want to do anything crazy, I just want to make sure that we've got a nice natural water source and maybe raise some areas just so that this place doesn't look so flat. And then when I'm happy with it, I'm going to fill this recessed area of water. I kind of like the idea of it being kind of halved, with a body of water in the middle that stretches the width of the enclosure that the animals would have to cross somehow. This would be a good opportunity to add a climbing frame for the animals to climb across the water source. I think that will add just a bit of extra interest to this enclosure. And with the arrival of Citra, my Binturong from one of my other zoos, which I don't know why I have a special bond with this Binturong, so quite happy that she's joining the team. I start to alter the terrain features with a lot of soil. These guys like to have a lot of dirt in their enclosure and they just like to get a bit mucky, I guess. So as always, I prioritise the placement of the soil under the water. I think it looks a lot more natural to have the bottom of our water sources be covered in soil rather than grass or something, because it's not going to grow that well under the water. So that's always a good place to start because it makes the most sense to have it there. After that, I just make sure it's nice and patchy to add a bit of variation so it doesn't look too blanketed in one way or the other. And something else that was needed was a bit more short grass. As always with this particular biome and continent, basically the map that I've started building on, there is way too much long grass for basically every animal that we've had. They've all preferred short grass. I've had to get rid of a lot of the grass that's already there. Once myself and the adorable Binturongs were happy with the terrain features, I decided to start adding our plants, and I went for some rather large strangler figs as a starting point. I thought it'd be kind of cool to have one either side of the water source, kind of mirroring each other, and I had an idea to try and build a treehouse around one of them, as these guys are so fond of climbing. I did opt to use some slightly smaller trees as well, but I didn't go too heavy with the trees. I wanted it to mainly be about ground coverage, a lot of bushes and flowers and stuff. As always, some rocks around the water hole, and just really make sure there's quite a lot of variety. I wanted this area to look quite tropical, quite rich with life, so there's a lot of colour. I add some effects for falling leaves, make sure to do a lot of leaf litter on the ground. I just want this place to look lush and full of life. But before I got onto more of the detailing plants, I actually decided to put in the climbing frames that I was going to be using for this habitat, because I think, just like trees, it's important to have these larger structures in place to begin with, because then you can really understand how smaller plants and bushes and flowers and all that are going to look alongside these items. They're such big things to take up quite a lot of space. I think it's important that you're bearing them in mind when you're placing your foliage. So placing them beforehand is a really good idea. Now, as I said earlier, I wanted to try and make a tree house for these guys, as I know that they really like living in trees. Well, maybe they don't. I just know they like a lot of climbing, at least. So the idea for this was to use a few square climbing platforms, and then I could create an outline for where this structure was going to go. It'd just be a basic platform that is risen up into the tree canopy, and then I will use various climbing structures like the longer platforms and the tall logs and stuff to create kind of a, well, it's basically a climbing frame. It kind of looks like a scaffolding almost to get up to this point where the animals will then be able to get in and relax. When it came to adding a covering so that this could actually be used as a hard shelter, because that is the requirement for a hard shelter, it needs to have a roof, somewhere that they can shelter from the rain. When it came to adding a covering, I used a East Asian tiled piece which has a square missing in the middle so that it would nicely let the tree go right through it. I got that to a height I was happy with, and then started to place some wooden beams to support on each corner and kind of the bits in the middle, just anywhere that I thought it would make sense to have supporting wooden beams. It did take a bit of playing about with to get this just right. The animals don't actually go up there that much, I think maybe because it's quite a lot of climbing to get there in the first place, they're a bit less keen. But I have seen them napping up there from time to time. I also placed some leafy bedding up there as well, because of course it's going to be the leaf bedding up there rather than hay or something. And yeah, it's a pretty simple build, this treehouse, and I like the idea of making one a bit more treehouse looking. This is very much just a place for them to sleep in a tree. I would very much like to build a more traditional looking treehouse in the future, something that looks like something you might find in somebody's back garden. But I am really happy with how this turned out, and the Binturong seem to like it too, so quite happy with that. And then once this was done, I could actually start with all the bushes and shrubs and stuff that I'd mentioned previously. I'll pop that in time lapse, and I'll just stop talking for a minute so you can sit back and enjoy. And with the final touches of adding all the enrichment items, this enclosure is done. I appreciate that this is quite a quick video as it was quite a small and unintentional habitat. I only really built this to fill this space. So I appreciate you having watched the video. Thank you for liking it if you did like it, and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more videos just like this in the future. We currently have, at the moment, we've only got 3 videos left in this Little Asia series. So start dropping suggestions for what the next zoo should be like, its name, or animals you want to see in the zoo. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.
Sizowaka,